What's good, Fin Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason, and we are back for another one yet today alone. Second episode of today. Tonight we're gonna focus more on recapping, reviewing, and just looking at some of the analytics from yesterday's game. Just now that everyone's had about 24 hours to allow the loss to settle in, to breathe a little bit, we're gonna recap, review, go over some things. As usual, I'm going to give my weekly state of my weekly state of the Dolphins address. So shout out to everyone already showing up in the comments right now. Appreciate some of y'all. We had over 400 people in the chat today for the day show. Hopefully we can get back up there. Yeah, everyone's wanting a rant right now. I'm going to get into it. Don't worry. My weekly state of the Dolphins address, which is turning into my weekly rant. Don't worry. We'll be talking about it. But yeah, tonight, I don't have a ton of articles we're going to go over. We're going to go over the PFF grades. Obviously, we're going to go over the next gen stats. I got a couple quirky facts I want to go over. We'll go over the passing charts. There is some roster news I want to discuss. And then, as usual, I'm going to sit here and do my weekly State of the Dolphins address. And let's get into that right now. For me, it's quite crazy to think, I was just speaking with Martin before we went live, and we were talking about the game Tua had, and it's crazy because he threw the ball 40 times. If you were to take those two picks, those 2% were literally 5% of his throws. They account for 5% of his total throws. And, people aren't looking at the bright spots and the signs of growth and the good things that were shown in literally 95% of his passes yesterday. Everybody wants to stick on the last 5%. Well, let me tell you something. Brian Flores isn't sticking on that last 5%, and I'll let you know why. So, I played ball up here. Everyone knows Martin Story played for Florida A&M. And, we talked about this, and I said to him, I said, people just aren't getting it, Martin. And Martin goes, what do you mean, Reason? And I said, in football terms, from the football perspective, in game, in house, in organization, Tua's probably not catching as much heat as some of the people on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook are trying to account towards him. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you think about it, in a football perspective, in-game perspective, think about it. You're on the sidelines, you're in the game, everything's happening. Tua's interceptions were critical, and that critical moments and were god-awful. But by the end of the game, he had put the ball back into the coach's hands, into the defense's hands, for them to do what they got to do. In a sense, he nullified his earlier mistakes because he said, I've done what I can do with the time I had left. Here's the 1-point lead. Go get it done. And for the second week in a row, the defense could not stop the opposing offense from gaining enough yardage to get into field goal range. And I mean, they got into field goal range with about a minute 40. So they had plenty of time to spare. But we can step back and in hindsight say, okay, if Tua doesn't throw the pick on those two drives, we come away with points and we win. You know what I mean? Now I do think Tua needs to clean up these interceptions. I do think his interceptions were at terrible points of the game and were inexcusable. But the fact of the matter is, I want people to really sit back and watch this. I want you to I want you to actually think about this for a second here. If you're Stephen Ross, who were you come away blaming at the end of the game? Tua Tagovailoa or Brian Flores? And this is why I say that. if you saw when Tua gave the Dolphins the 1-point lead, it cut to Dan Marino, Stephen Ross, and all of Stephen Ross's buddies in their press box. Now, Ross was probably embarrassed early on in front of his buddies when those 2 interceptions happened, but by the end of Tua's day, Stephen Ross, they were all cheering, they were all celebrating, and Ross was looking around and saying, "Oh my God, the kid brought us back into this." All right. And if you go back and again, you watch the broadcast, they cut to Brian Flores multiple times during that final drive that led to a touchdown. Sorry, that led to the field goal that clinched the game. And Brian Flores, every time they cut to him, was losing it. It was obviously because of the big chunk plays, but it was because Flores realized what was happening. The game was no longer in Tua's lap. Tua had done everything he could do with the time he had allotted to him. And in that time, he brought you back and he gave you the lead. If you think about it, Tua kind of shifted the pressure back into Brian Flores' lap for Brian Flores and his defense to deliver. Because remember, the 2 things Flores has stressed since he got here was disciplined football, which they haven't been, and defense. Capitalization on the defense. That's what your problem is right now. Like, you got to understand, only 26 quarterbacks have ever thrown for 4 touchdowns, have an 80% over an 80% completion percentage, and over 290 yards in a game. Only 2 of those have ever lost, and that was Matt Ryan and Tua Tagovailoa. And here's the other thing too that people need to realize: the only other player in that of that 26 to have 2 interceptions was Dan Marino. I'm not sitting here saying he's Dan Marino. Hell, I'm not even saying he's Matt Ryan. But if you go outside those interceptions, Tua was fantastic. That he was a contributing factor to the loss. But anyone that wants to put the loss fully on Tua Tagovailoa, they're not watching what's going on right now. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa has literally never played a game with Mike Gesicki, Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, and Jalen Waddle all healthy at the same time. Yet, didn't they upgrade the weapons around him? He's throwing go-ahead touchdowns to Mac Hollins. I want y'all to think about this right now. A lot of people are loving Mac Hollins and they're saying EM was right, Mac Hollins this, Mac Hollins that, and I agree with all of you. But who put Mac Hollins on the map? Tua Tagovailoa. That's who's put Mac Hollins in the map. That's who's made Mac Hollins relevant to all of y'all. It's Tua Tagovailoa, no one else. Like, Tua is actually, and that's a living proof of him actually elevating players around him. Mac Hollins was can't stay healthy, and even when he does, he's irrelevant and unnoticeable on the field. He comes here, builds a rapport with Tua, and all of a sudden, Mac Hollins is literally relevant to people, and people are giving EM props and give EM props because he was the first to call that out. But Tua is the reason why EM is right. Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki has a 115-yard game, and look at all the questions people had about Tua after only seeing one game. Oh, he's not athletic enough. Oh, Gesicki, da-da-da-da-da. Look at this. He comes back. Waddle's yardage is up. Gesicki's yardage and usage is up. And the question everyone was talking shit about whether he could be athletic and mobile in the pocket. Look at Tua out here creating with his legs to the point where Tua is so trucked right now. he steamrolled a defender yesterday and knocked him out of the game. And this man's coming off fractured ribs. Talk about it. Like, I'm telling y'all right now, if Watson was not hanging over this team, literally, I'm not even going to talk about Herbert, but if Watson was not hanging over this team, we would all be enjoying this ride because the kid is showing you growth. He's actually built personal momentum heading into the Bills game. Now, has the team as a whole? No, but you got to ask yourself. I'm not saying it'll happen. What if this kid goes up and puts 300, nears 300, gets around 300 yards again, drops 2 or 3 touchdowns and no interceptions this week, and we come close to, or in fact do beat the Buffalo Bills? What are people going to say late? What are people going to say then? Like, this is what I'm sitting here saying. There's so many positives you could take away, but we're allowing the negatives to be overreacted to, overhyped, and to unjustly overshadow the good he's doing, all because people are seeing the Watson carrot being dangled. Who's to say Watson? Listen, you know what? You need to give Tua a lot of props for he's playing through all the noise. He's playing through him knowing people in that organization do not believe in him wholeheartedly. He's playing through all that, and then he has self-conflicted adversity that he brings upon himself with bad decisions, bad throws, and bad interceptions on the field, and the kid still fights back. The resilience, the heart is ridiculous from the kid. That is growth right there. This kid's showing you he's got the mental fortitude to take the ups and downs of being a starting quarterback in the NFL. That is a big thing. Not a lot of guys early on in bad situations, because that's what the offense is right now with the coaching and with the people not staying healthy. The offensive line is just starting to get their shit together 7 weeks in. And then you got people in the organization that he knows don't believe in him. In this terrible situation, this guy is still fighting through it, and he's still trying to be a bright spot. He's still trying to be a bright spot through all the darkness right now. It's kind of crazy, man. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, man, Joe Burrow threw 3 interceptions and 2 touchdowns in week 2 of this season. No one's hanging him for that. I went and I checked today. Okay. Obviously, Nuno Greasy and Dan Marino hold the team record for most touchdowns thrown in the game with 6. But only Matt Moore, Ryan Tannehill, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brian Greasy, Dan Marino, and Tua Tagovailoa have thrown 4 touchdowns or more as a Miami Dolphin in a game. And this is a team that's been through over 20 quarterbacks alone since Dan Marino left in 1999. In 21 years, we've been through more quarterbacks than years since Dan Marino retired. And yet, just in those 21 years, Tua's on a short list. Like, do you want to hear something crazy? I'm going to tell you something crazy right now. Tua Tagovailoa, if you go over the last 2 weeks alone, Tua Tagovailoa has the 3rd highest completion percentage in the NFL over the last 2 weeks at 74.7%. That's better than Josh Allen and only Aaron Rodgers at 75.9% and Derek Carr at 80.3% have better completion percentages. Over the last 3 weeks, Tua has the 3rd most passing yards in the NFL. Joe Burrow has 687, Derek Carr has 664, and Tua has 620. And don't forget, he's also got another 51 yards rushing. So he's got over 670 yards from the line of scrimmage alone over the last 2 weeks. See, here's my thing. A lot of people wanted, you knew what the narrative was going to be. Even if we beat the Jags and the Falcons, it was going to be, oh, he should have beat those teams. When heading into those games, it was Tua better put up numbers, Tua better throw for 300 plus yards, Tua better throw for this. Tua does all that. It's just his interceptions are ill-timed and overall poor, but he does everything else. He puts up the yards for you. He puts up the touchdowns for you. But you want to move the goalposts on him. Like, he was damned if he did, damned if he didn't heading into these 2 weeks. Even if he beat them and put up 400 yards against each team, everyone would be saying, oh, it's the Jags and the Falcons. Because they're trying to use that same narrative. They're trying to say, oh, it's the Jags and the Falcons. He should beat them. Well, last I checked, 22 people play the game of football, not one person. And last I checked, against the Jags and against the Falcons, those games literally came down to final drives where Brian Flores against the Jags, boneheaded timeout and mismanagement of timeouts led for them going to the Hail Mary to that slant pass that they completed to set up a field goal. And then this week, Tua gives them the lead, and again, the defense cannot make a stop and allows the opposing team to get in field goal range when that's all they needed. Powerhouse says Flores is the reason our defense has suffered, and Tua is the reason our offense has gotten better. It's crazy. You know what? This is what's crazy about this right now. This is what's legitimately crazy about it. You look at it and you see the reports coming out about players in the room quitting on Flores. Well, by the looks of it, Tua is one of the few players giving you 110% right now, Brian. And I'm telling you, don't even listen to what Brian Flores said post-game, where he said that's what you want from your own quarterback to put you in a position to win, where Flores wasn't blaming Tua. Don't even look at that. Look at Flores' body language. If you got the broadcast from yesterday from Fox, go back and watch it, and go watch Brian Flores on that final drive. They literally cut to him 2 or 3 times, and every time he's losing his mind because his defense is letting up big chunk plays. Flores knew what the deal was. He said, oh shit, this kid just switched the narrative. He just put the game back in my lap. That's exactly what happened. This was no longer, oh, Tua cost us the game. This was, oh, damn, Tua gave us the lead, and we got to hold them off from getting a field goal. That's what it was. And I'm telling you right now, if Tua plays well against the Bills, I don't want to hear nothing. And here's another thing. Everyone's worried about who's calling plays on offense. Who's calling plays on defense right now? On 3rd and 10, why are you dropping back in zone and giving the middle of the field up to a guy like Kyle Pitts? Who the hell is calling right? Who right now is calling the plays on defense? Because if it's Boyer, guess what, Brian Flores? You might have to step in and take the reins from the guy. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. This team is not built for zone, so why are we running it? You built this to be a predominantly man press team. Why are you straying away from it? The only explanation I can come up from is there's got to be injuries at hand. We know with X and Byron there are. So that's the only thing that makes sense is they're dropping back in the zone because of potential injuries. Other than that, I don't know but if you 3rd and 10, you drop into zone against Matt Ryan, a guy who's seen everything in this league and been a league MVP before, what the hell do you think he's going to do when your strength is man? Tell the guys to buck up. This is why we're paying our corners $15+ million a year. Play man this one play. I don't care about your injuries. Go out there and give me 110% and get the win. But I think right now, I mean, you saw the reports earlier today if you watched my show. Guys, players are even mad how Tua's been was handled last year. There's clearly a sect of players in that locker room that support Tua. That's another problem. That is another problem right now. You're on 3rd and 10, man. Man press. Tell your guys, like, this is where you made your defense. Being able to send exotic packages on 3rd and long. Do it. Exactly, Rob D. Rob D says in crucial moments, we decide to rush 4 and drop everyone else, the complete opposite of last year. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I don't know what's going on. So, I mean, there's just so much wrong right now with the Miami Dolphins. They got to get it together for sure. All right. With that all said, let's get into smash that like button, subscribe if you'd like to donate. PayPal.me/Phinside. You can also donate through the super chat. Become a Phinside the NFL Patreon, patreon.com/Phinside the NFL. Also become a member. Go hit that join button next to subscribe. Both the Patreon and to become a YouTube channel member are in the description below. You will get videos early, like my Jalen Phillips film study that, if everything goes well, should be coming out tomorrow night for you guys. First, you will also get access to custom emojis if you're a YouTube member, and if you are a Patreon, you will get access to insider Patreon info that I drop there, things that I'm told that I can relay to you, as well as you will get mod status. Patchvibes.com, use code Phinside to save 20% off your order. Backroomcollection.net, use code Reason to save 10% off your order. And then ThriveFantasy.com, use code Phinside to have every dollar up to your first 100 deposited matched. Use code Phinside at ThriveFantasy.com, your number one site in fantasy prop betting. All right, let's get into everything here. By the way, subscribe if you are new, guys. There's 160 of you. Smash that like button. Help a brother out with the algorithm. Smash that like button. All right. Now let's start off what we do every review show, and that is we are going to start off with, of course, the snap counts. And first, we are going to look at, of course, the defensive snap counts and some things that should automatically pop up to you. Holland, 100% of the snaps, all 63. This guy is locked in. Safety 1 for this team. And look at Brandon Jones. And then Byron Jones and Xavier Howard obviously played 100% of the snaps. Other things to look at: Sam Iguavin got his biggest workload of the season, playing 53 of the 63 snaps. That's 84% of the snaps. Plus, he played 57% of the special team snaps as well. And then you got Rowe. Due to the matchup against Kyle Pitts, I would assume his usage is up from last week where it was really low. And then you got Jalen Phillips, only 15 snaps. His snap count really plummeting from where it was the last couple weeks. It was really trending upwards. Jalen Phillips lightened workload, only 15 of 63 snaps for about 24%. So yeah, kind of crazy. And obviously you see Brandon Jones getting a more of a workload than a guy like Jason Mcourty. Now, in case you didn't know, we'll have an update for you guys with Jason Mcourty after we do the snap counts. We'll get into that. But yeah, those are your defensive snap counts for the Dolphins. Now, taking a look at the offensive snap counts for the Miami Dolphins, they are as follows. So when you take a look at it, some interesting things to note. Gaskin, clearly with Malcolm Brown now hurt. Again, we'll get into that in a second. His workload went up. He had 46 of the 73 snaps for 63% workload. Mike Gesicki had one of his bigger workloads of the season. He saw 60 of the 73 snaps for 82% of the snap count. Wilson, only 3 snaps, Albert Wilson. Totally outsnapped by Isaiah Ford, outsnapped by Preston, who hasn't been good, and Matt Collins. So Albert Wilson, his usage is plummeting right now, and he's not even being targeted when he's open. And then, yeah, you see even kind of a big workload for Shaheen, who saw 70% of the snaps. So, yeah, and obviously with Malcolm Brown, Ahmed's workload went up a lot too. Now, speaking of speaking of, I apologize. A couple roster moves I wanted to actually get into it with you guys. Speaking of Malcolm Brown and Jason McCourty. In case you guys did not hear the news today, a couple roster things happened. First, Jason McCourty and Malcolm Brown are going on IR. They are out at least 3 weeks per Brian Flores today. And Jerome Baker, all those MRIs came back negative. He's looking to practice this week, so Jerome Baker is going to be back while Jason McCourty and Malcolm Brown are officially going to the IR. Why not? It's been a carousel for players on the IR for the Dolphins this season, and it continues. So a couple players. And then obviously the other roster move that everyone should be talking about, Reed Sinnett is no longer a Miami Dolphin, people. It's painful. I know. It's painful. I know. But the Philadelphia Eagles claimed former Dolphins quarterback Reed Sinnett. So Reed Sinnett is now a Philadelphia Eagle. So goodbye, Reed. No longer will we be Sinnett to win it. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your contributions during the preseason. No more Sinnett to win it. It's officially over. Even before the merchandise could hit the stands, Reed Sinnett is now an Eagle. Peace out. We salute you, Reed. We salute you. The Phinside salute. Okay. Continuing on, let's get into the PFF grades for this week, because there's a lot of interesting stuff to go ahead and look at here. So this is how offensively Tua Tagovailoa had the highest offensive grade of his career. Jalen Waddle led the way with an 86.8 offensive grade. Tua Tagovailoa had his highest grade of his career at 84.5. Durham Smythe, he was your third highest graded at 80.6. Mike Gesicki was your fourth highest at 76.5. And Myles Gaskin at a 74.8. Obviously, your lowest graded when you look down is Adam Shaheen at 40. It's crazy, but he's at 43 overall grade. And sticking with Tua for a sec, Tua has earned an 89.0 overall grade the last 2 weeks from PFF, and that is the fourth best among all QBs in the league. So over the last 2 weeks. All right. So obviously Preston Williams, he earned a very low grade and not very good by any stretch of the imagination. And then Robert Hunt, painful. And then Austin Jackson, obviously still painful. Um, and then yeah, let's get into this further. Okay, so now let's get into the pass blocking grades because there was some stuff here. So this was their third lowest pressure allowed output. I believe they allowed 12 against the Colts as well. They allowed 1 sack, 2 hits, 9 hurries. Again, the main culprit was Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson now has he still has the most allowed pressures in the NFL currently. Um, it's disgusting, guys. He has allowed 33 pressures, which is the most pressures allowed of any lineman in the NFL. Obviously, this week too, you'll notice all the pressures were on the offensive line, and Austin Reeder, you know, Mance had 0 pressures allowed on his first go with his team. Now, another thing I want to show you, when you look at Tua, key thing that stands out, look at Tua when he's kept clean. 24 of 30, 80% completion percentage, 205 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Tua, when he's kept clean, is making a difference. And even look at when he was blitzed, 6 of 8, 45 yards, clean. So, and then obviously you had that pressure, that Austin Jackson. But other than that, he was 8 for 10 under pressure for 86 yards. So when he's kept clean, go look at that. That's a beautiful thing, man. When Tua is being kept clean, he is delivering. Last week, you guys remember how good he was when he's kept clean. If you don't, um, this is what he was last week when he's kept clean. Last week when he was kept clean, Tua was 24 of 30 for 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions and 213 yards. So 418 of his yards over the past 2 weeks have come when he's kept clean. And he's 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, and like an 80% completion percentage when he's kept clean over the last 2 weeks. Great stuff from Tua Tagovailoa. You're seeing the growth. All right. Now, when we go take a look at the defensive grades for the Miami Dolphins, Ogba was your number 1 graded player for the whole game with a 90.9. And he had 6 pressures on 3 hits and 3 hurries. And Emmanuel Ogba right now, guys, he's 10th most pressures of any defensive end in the NFL with 27, and he has the 2nd most quarterback hits of any defensive end in the NFL. He has 9 on the season right now. So Emmanuel Ogba is looking to get paid. And if you look at the defense too, 20 pressures, guys. They created 20 pressures, and that is their 3rd most all year. Had 20 against the Colts. And then, sorry, I screwed up earlier. Yeah, the 12 pressures the offensive line allowed, that was their least allowed since week 1. They allowed 9 against the New England Patriots, so that was their 2nd most. But this was their 3rd most pressures gained as a defense. Um, you know, we'll get into the coverage. It wasn't pretty, but it was kind of for Xavier Howard. We'll talk about it. But your worst graded were Landon Roberts, Jerome Baker, Andrew Van Ginkel. Jalen Phillips got a bad grade on 15 snaps. Eric Rowe didn't have a great grade, but yeah, your top graded were Ogba, Howard, McCourty, Duke Riley, Brandon Jones, and Wilkins. And we'll get into why Howard was so highly graded. All right, so if we go into receiving versus coverage, okay. So sorry, my bad. I apologize. Coverage versus receiving. Let's go into this. So, if you look at Xavier Howard, you look at that and you say, he allowed one reception on 8 targets, which is fantastic, and for 28 yards and obviously a first down. And that was that big Kyle Pitts gain, right? So, but if you look at him overall, yesterday, Xavier Howard, he had one reception for 28 yards allowed, one interception, and he had a 2.1 passer rating when he was targeted. It was actually quite crazy. If we go back to this and we go into defensive grades, I wanted to show you guys. So I go and I click on Xavier Howard. Yeah, okay. So here we go. Against Atlanta down here in this final line, right? Look at this. A 2.1 NFL passer rating when he was targeted yesterday. 2 pass breakups, an interception. You go look at what a stat line for Xavier Howard. I know he allowed that throw to Pitts, but I mean, no one was stopping that. That was a perfect throw by. It took a perfect throw to beat Xavier Howard yesterday, basically. Eric Rowe. He allowed 6 receptions on 7 targets for 101 yards. Kyle Pitts gave him the work. 3 receptions on 3 targets for 76 yards. He allowed 5 first downs. Did Eric Rowe. He got 8 yesterday. Byron Jones, he allowed 6 receptions on 6 targets for 43 yards. 3 first downs and a touchdown to Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley had his way with him when he was targeted. And Landon Roberts, Kyle Pitts matched up with him multiple times and had his way with them. 2 targets, 2 receptions, 46 yards, 2 first downs against Landon Roberts and Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts had a 93.5 grade yesterday, as you can see right there, offensive grade. And then you see overall, Landon Roberts allowed 5 receptions for 72 yards and 3 first downs. Not good. Javon Holland, he had 3 receptions credited to him for 71 yards. That big touchdown to Russell Gage, they charged to Javon Holland. So he allowed a touchdown. Andrew Van Ginkel, he again struggled in coverage, allowing 3 receptions on 3 targets for 10 yards. Obviously, he had that good play on the Cordell Patterson, but allowed a first down. But against Hayden Hurst, it gave him the work. Kyle Pitts was up against Nick Needham, the only person Kyle Pitts did not catch a ball on. Calvin Ridley had 1 reception for 11 yards. And then Calvin Ridley was held to donuts by Brendan Scarlett. Jason McCourty also managed to hold Kyle Pitts to donuts. Jerome Baker held Ridley to donuts. So you look at Kyle Pitts, how it's stacked up for him, right? McCourty and Needham held him receptionless, but everyone else was out there just giving away yardage. So Rowe and Roberts, the worst of it. So tough one for the coverage of the Miami Dolphins. Now let's get into some next gen stats. Let's start off with the passing charts like we do weekly. We'll get into the passing charts and then we will get into some next gen analytics for the game. All right. So, once we get into the passing chart right here. So, Matt Ryan was 25 of 40 for 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. You see the ball being pushed. I mean, he was 5 for 6 beyond 20 yards against us. That big touchdown to Russell Gage. So you look at over the field, good distribution, but you see how it's centered over the middle of the field. They're really trying to eat because we're leaving it open in zone a lot yesterday. So, but he spread the ball a little bit. Didn't really go heavy to the right, but more to the left, but really tried to eat over the middle of the Dolphins defense. That's for sure. When you look at Tua's passing yard chart from yesterday, this is what it looks like. Tua didn't really test the defense beyond um, 20 yards a ton. I know he did last week a lot more, but he was 32 of 40, and I mean, you know, 14 of his 40 attempts came beyond 10 yards. So, and two of his touchdowns did too. But you could tell he was really, the ball didn't get pushed a ton down the field yesterday. So, Tua, when you look at it, more of a kind of taking what the defense was giving you, which was it makes that throw to Durham Smythe, that interception, all that more confusing because I know when I look at the all 22, I'm going to see stuff underneath because if I remember correctly, I saw stuff underneath. So, but it looked like, take what the defense was giving you, move the football, right? So, and let your playmakers get in space and get yards after the catch, which is how this offense is supposed to be built. So, that is the passing chart of Tua Tagovailoa. And then when we get into the next gen analytics for the football game, I mean, it's interesting stuff. So this is what we got here. Um in terms of longest completed air distance, Tua 33.1 yards, Matt Ryan 50.5, fastest ball carrier, Myles Gaskin at 9.41 yards yesterday. And then on the interception, Oluokun had a 19.6 miles per hour run, 19.68. So he was actually the fastest ball carrier on the field yesterday, faster. The fastest sack was Deion Jones in 3.4 seconds for the Falcons and Javon Hollins in 4 seconds for the Dolphins. Now, when you look at the passing chart, now you really see Tua did not go beyond 20 yards, right? You see he went beyond 10. 10 of his passes came beyond. So, and he was 7 of 10, but a lot of the stuff was taking what the defense was giving him. Whereas Matt Ryan, he had he was perfect from beyond 20 yards. He was 4 for 4 from beyond 20, like from beyond 20 not yards, he was 4 for 4. That's crazy. Man, and he put up some good numbers. I mean, what 142 yards and a touchdown on throws beyond 20 yards yesterday, Matt Ryan? Defense is just giving them up, and the secondary is supposed to be the heart of this defense, and they were just eating. Painful. Now, when you look at the rushing attack yesterday, um, we clearly were not setting the edge well, wide right yesterday, defensively, and then offensively, we were not running outside the right tackle very well at all. But I said contain Cordell Patterson. That was one of my keys to the defense. On my previous show on Friday, they obviously didn't do a very good job of that. And Cordell Patterson had key first downs on that last drive. When you look at receiving and when you look at receiving here, you remember Kyle Pitts, he only had 0.4 yards of separation on that catch he made against Xavier Howard along that right sideline. He wasn't really separating at a ridiculous rate. 2.85 yards. Calvin Ridley 3.11 yards. Hayden Hurst 5.79 yards. Russell Gage at 4.24 yards. For the Dolphins, Shaheen 4.65 yards. Smythe 2.34 yards. Waddle 3.44. Gesicki 2.23. Preston Williams 2.59. Gesicki obviously he now has 200 yards over the last 2 weeks and 2 touchdowns, I believe. So he had 7 for 8 for 85 yards, while Kyle Pitts was 7 for 8 for 163. Now, if you look at defensive pass rush, you know, average separation from the QB, Adam Butler 3.87 yards, but he didn't manage to get anything, but he was getting close. Grady Jarrett 3.68 yards. Obviously, the average league average right now is 4.52 yards. So the Dolphins had 3 of their main 4 rushers under that average, while the Falcons only had 1. So not really a sturdy pass rush we face. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens this weekend when the Buffalo Bills come to town. Man, it's just crazy right now because Tua Tagovailoa, if you look at him since his return, he's got a 7.4. He's got a 74.7 completion percentage. He's got a 102.7 passer rating. He's got 620 passing yards, 52 rushing yards when he only had 109 all season last year. He's averaging about 310 passing yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's been pressured 31 times. And in fourth quarters since he's returned, Tua Tagovailoa is 20 of 24 for 233 yards with 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. So he's actually been very good in fourth quarters. And yeah, Tua's been doing his part. Yeah, we're at Buffalo this week. Yeah, we're at Buffalo this week. All right. So another thing I wanted to show you guys was the sack versus pass protection chart that came out right here. So if you look at here, the team block pass grade right here, right? So the Dolphins right now as a team, let me just make sure. As a team right now, the Dolphins are not very good. Their pass break, to give you an exact number so you guys can know what their pass blocking grade is right now as a team. I just want to tell you all this quick. Right now, they are 49.4. We are now the worst pass blocking team. Once again, we had gotten until 4th, but we are the worst in the league right now. So you see this. He's got a 49.4 team pass block grade, but look at the amount of the sack rate, only 4 sacks. Just over 4 sacks a game. Sorry, just over 4 sacks against. So look at this right now. Tua Tagovailoa with a terrible team in front of him in terms of pass blocking is somehow managing to evade sacks. He's doing it again, people. Did it last year, and he's doing it again. Remember, he had the second highest evading pressure rate of any quarterback in the league last year, only next to Josh Allen. And Tagovailoa, if you see right here, that dot over by the 4, he's doing it again. So, look at that. He's got the lowest sack rate up against the lowest grade. That is crazy. That is crazy. That should show you what he's doing right now. So, again, you add in the fact that since he's returned, he's faced 31 pressures. He's got 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's averaging about 310 passing yards per game, 52 rush yards, 620 pass yards, a 102.7 passer rating, 74.7 completion percentage, which is actually that 74.1 completion percentage is 3rd best in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. And those 620 passing yards is 3rd best in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. And then in fourth quarter, since he's returned, he's 20 of 24 for 233 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. So he's been delivering since he returned. It's just, here's the thing. People want more, and they need a scapegoat. They need someone to blame. So, I mean, he's made mistakes. He's far from perfect right now, is Tua Tagovailoa. Do not get it twisted. He is far from perfect. But to put all the blame on this kid, to say he is the main problem that needs to be fixed, to me is absolutely asinine. To me, that's someone being narrow-sighted, narrow-minded, and not seeing the whole scope of the situation and where all the issues lie. And, I personally, I don't know, man. I'm really, I get told things, but when you ask about me forming my own personal belief, I only ever tell you guys what I'm hearing. You know, like I said earlier today, the Dolphins find themselves in a position where, because they've been flirting with Watson the way they have, they might ruin their relationship with the current guy they have. And now, by holding firm and holding tight, it looks like other teams might get involved in the Watson sweepstakes. So they might even miss out on Deshaun Watson after all of this, but yet they might make their relationship, Flores and Greer's relationship with Tua might be irreparable after this. Like, this is what they're getting into right now. In the midst of courting a quarterback you might not ever end up with, you might cast out and you might sever your relationship with the guy you currently have that you're not even giving the proper chance to develop, who, through all the adversity, all the animosity, is going out there and still performing, whether it's self-conflicted on the field by bad interceptions or bad decisions, or whether it's out of his hands and it's the media and it's the team not stepping up for him. This kid continues to strive to be great in a situation that is far from great, and this kid continues to try and be good in a bad situation. So they are walking a very fine line. A very fine line. And I just hope this does not backfire in their face, because if they end up not getting Watson and they piss Tua off so much that we end up watching him develop over the next year or two, and then he doesn't want to come here and sign an extension, then I'm going to have a real problem. Like, it literally could come down to a point where Ross might be forced to choose between people. So, I mean, Flores and Greer are so distracted by Watson that they can't fix the offensive line totally, and they can't fix the run defense and the linebacking core and the second level of this defense. They're letting themselves get distracted by this quarterback when there's other issues that need to be filled right now too. So they're going to have to be better on their side too. You'd hate to see this be another Alex Smith situation where he was drafted high, the team doesn't know how to properly use him that drafted him, he goes somewhere else and he has MVP type play. And that's the way this is heading. Like, they've literally backed themselves into a corner where you literally have to make this trade for Watson. It's now time to shit, because there ain't no choice to get out the pot, because you're almost past the point of no return. And that's the problem. Because they've been playing this game of lover affair, now they might actually be in a point where if you don't get Watson, you've ruined your relationship with Tua. So now you're damned if you don't, damned if you do. You get to feel like Tua does. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds. Guys, I'll be back tomorrow night. We will go over the all 22 of Tua Tagovailoa. I'll be back with the guys around 9:30 tomorrow night. We'll break down every single dropback of Tua Tagovailoa, me, Martin, and Ball Game. We'll let you know what the real story is. Until tomorrow night, guys, stay happy, healthy, safe, and blessed. Fins up all day, every day.